Craving those dirt-cheap American dinners from old 1960s cookbooks? These budget bites once filled plates and bellies when every penny counted. Which tasty tricks from that thrifty era are still worth bringing back today? Hamburger rice skillet pie. Picture this. Ground beef stretched with rice and baked in a cast iron skillet until the top formed a golden crust that cracked when you cut into it. This wasn't just dinner, it was economic survival disguised as comfort food. Born from the lingering frugality of the Depression, 1950s housewives discovered they could make a pound of hamburger feed 6 people by mixing it with cheap rice, canned tomatoes, and whatever vegetables needed using up. The magic happened when you pressed the mixture into a well-greased skillet and baked it until the edges caramelized and the center steamed into tender perfection. Each slice revealed layers of savory meat, fluffy rice, and melted cheese that stretched across your fork. This dish represented the American dream in edible form, making something substantial and satisfying from humble, affordable ingredients that anyone could find at the corner grocery store. Before we move on to the next food, make sure to subscribe for more nostalgic videos from the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s. Buttermilk potato pancakes. Before boxed pancake mix conquered breakfast tables, resourceful cooks transformed leftover mashed potatoes into golden, crispy pancakes that sizzled in bacon grease until their edges curled and crisped. These weren't your typical flapjacks. They were substantial, savory discs with a tender, fluffy interior and a crispy exterior that crackled when you bit down. The secret lay in the tangy buttermilk that reacted with baking soda to create countless tiny air bubbles, making each pancake light despite the heavy potato base. Farm families across the Midwest perfected this technique during harsh winters when fresh ingredients were scarce, but root cellars still held pounds of potatoes and crocks of cultured buttermilk. The result was a breakfast that stuck to your ribs through morning chores, with a slightly sour tang that cut through the richness of butter, melting into every porous crater. These pancakes proved that Depression-era ingenuity could transform mundane leftovers into something genuinely delicious. Carrot ring with cream sauce. Nothing said, "Company's coming," like a carrot ring molded in a fancy bundt pan and smothered with rich cream sauce that pooled in the center hollow. This elegant presentation disguised the humble truth. Carrots were dirt cheap, especially when bought in bulk from local farms, and this dish could feed a crowd for pennies. The preparation was pure 1950s kitchen theater. Grated carrots mixed with breadcrumbs, eggs, and a touch of sugar, then steamed in a ring mold until it held its shape like edible architecture. The cream sauce was where housewives showed their skill. A perfect white sauce enriched with butter and seasoned with herbs that complemented the natural sweetness of the carrots. When unmolded, the golden ring glistened under dining room lights, looking far more expensive than its humble origins suggested. This dish exemplified 1950s entertaining philosophy. Presentation mattered as much as taste, and a clever cook could make inexpensive vegetables look like sophisticated cuisine worthy of the finest suburban dinner party. Apple sausage bread pudding. Sweet meets savory in this hearty dish that transformed day-old bread and breakfast sausage into a comforting casserole that filled bellies and stretched budgets. The genius lay in the combination. Tart apples balanced the richness of pork sausage while soaking up custard made from milk and eggs, creating layers of flavor that developed as it baked. Thrifty housewives discovered this dish during apple season when orchards sold bruised fruit cheap and stale bread cost pennies at the bakery's day-old rack. The preparation was almost meditative. Cubing bread, browning crumbled sausage until it released its smoky fat, then layering everything with sliced apples before drowning it all in a simple custard. As it baked, the top turned golden while the bottom stayed creamy, and the kitchen filled with the homey aroma of cinnamon and sage. Each spoonful delivered contrasting textures: crispy bread crust, tender apple chunks, and savory sausage bound together by silky custard. This dish proved that American cooks could take ingredients destined for the garbage and transform them into something truly satisfying. Cornflake crusted fish squares. Before frozen fish sticks revolutionized weeknight dinners, clever cooks created their own version using whatever white fish was cheapest at the market and cornflakes crushed into golden crumbs. This technique emerged from wartime rationing when breadcrumbs were precious, but breakfast cereal remained plentiful and affordable. The process was delightfully simple. Cut firm white fish into squares, dip in beaten egg, then roll in crushed cornflakes mixed with salt and pepper until each piece wore a coat of amber armor. When fried in hot oil, the cornflake coating shattered between your teeth with a satisfying crunch that gave way to flaky, tender fish inside. The sweetness of the corn balanced the oceanic flavor of the fish, while the texture contrast made each bite interesting. Children loved these because they tasted familiar yet special, while mothers appreciated how cornflakes stretched expensive protein and masked any fishy flavors that might cause dinner table rebellion. This dish represented 1950s innovation, taking industrial food products and reimagining them as home cooking solutions. Mock veal loaf. In an era when real veal cost more than most families could justify, resourceful cooks created this convincing substitute using ground pork, beef, and a secret ingredient that fooled even sophisticated palates. The magic component was milk-soaked bread that created the delicate texture associated with expensive veal while keeping costs minimal. This wasn't just budget cooking, it was culinary sleight of hand that required real skill to execute properly. The mixture had to be handled gently to maintain the fine texture, seasoned with herbs like sage and thyme that suggested European sophistication, then shaped into an elegant loaf that sliced cleanly without crumbling. When glazed with a simple pan sauce made from drippings and cream, the finished dish looked and tasted like something from a fancy restaurant rather than a suburban kitchen operating on a tight budget. Neighbors would ask for the recipe, never suspecting they were eating cleverly disguised hamburger. This dish embodied the 1950s aspiration to elevate everyday ingredients into something that suggested prosperity and refined taste. Zucchini tomato layer bake. Victory gardens taught Americans to grow zucchini, but nobody warned them how prolific these plants could be. By midsummer, creative cooks needed recipes that used pounds of the prolific squash before it spoiled. This layered casserole became the solution, alternating slices of tender zucchini with ripe tomatoes, then topping everything with cheese and breadcrumbs for a dish that tasted like summer in edible form. The preparation was satisfyingly rhythmic. Slice, layer, season, repeat, until the casserole dish overflowed with green and red abundance. A sprinkle of herbs from the kitchen garden and a generous layer of sharp cheddar cheese transformed humble vegetables into something worthy of Sunday dinner. As it baked, the vegetables released their juices, creating a natural sauce that bound everything together while the cheese melted into golden patches. Each serving delivered the essence of home gardening, proof that patient tending could yield abundance that fed the family for weeks. This dish connected suburban families to agricultural rhythms their grandparents knew by heart. Cheddar grits casserole. Southern comfort food traveled north during the Great Migration, and this creamy, cheesy casserole became a Midwest favorite that proved grits weren't just breakfast food anymore. The transformation happened when leftover morning grits, enriched with eggs and sharp cheddar, entered the oven to become something entirely different. A golden, puffed casserole with a crispy top and creamy interior that satisfied like the finest souffle. The secret was treating grits with respect, cooking them slowly until they released their corn flavor, then folding in beaten eggs that would create lift during baking. Sharp cheddar provided tang that cut through the richness, while breadcrumb topping added textural interest. This dish represented American food democracy. Southern techniques adapted to northern tastes, proving that good cooking transcended regional boundaries. When served alongside ham or fried chicken, it completed meals that celebrated American abundance while respecting thrifty traditions. Each creamy spoonful carried the warmth of hospitality and the satisfaction of making simple ingredients sing. Green bean croquettes. French technique met American practicality in these crispy golden cylinders that transformed leftover green beans into elegant appetizers worthy of the finest dinner party. The process required patience and skill, mincing cooked green beans fine, binding them with thick white sauce, then chilling the mixture until it was firm enough to shape into perfect cylinders. Each croquette was rolled in breadcrumbs and fried until golden, creating a contrast between the crunchy exterior and the creamy vegetable-studded interior that melted on your tongue. This dish emerged from the 1950s fascination with French cooking, filtered through American efficiency and economy. Housewives who had never been to France could create something that suggested continental sophistication using vegetables from their own gardens. The key was the white sauce, a perfect bechamel that required constant stirring and careful attention to prevent lumps. When done correctly, these croquettes rivaled anything served in fancy restaurants while using ingredients that cost pennies. They proved that technique mattered more than expensive ingredients in creating memorable food. Stuffed tomato boats. Late summer brought an abundance of garden tomatoes, and creative cooks discovered that the largest ones could become edible serving dishes for whatever needed using up. These weren't just stuffed tomatoes, they were complete meals disguised as vegetables, hollowed out and filled with everything from leftover rice and meat to bread stuffing enriched with herbs and cheese. The preparation was part cooking, part sculpture, carefully scooping out tomato flesh without breaking through the walls, then creating a filling that would complement the sweet tart tomato flavor while providing substance and nutrition. Popular variations included tuna salad mixed with celery and mayonnaise, or a savory mixture of breadcrumbs, ground meat, and herbs that baked until the tomato walls were tender but still held their shape. The genius was in the presentation. These looked elegant enough for company while using ingredients that might otherwise go to waste. Each bite delivered the concentrated flavor of vine-ripened tomatoes, enhanced by whatever creative combination the cook had devised. Tomato custard casserole. This unusual dish challenged conventional thinking about tomatoes, treating them like fruit in a sweet, savory custard that puzzled and delighted diners in equal measure. The concept emerged from Depression-era creativity when cooks discovered that tomatoes' natural acidity could create interesting flavor profiles when combined with eggs and cream in unexpected ways. The preparation required faith in the process, layering sliced tomatoes with a custard base made from eggs, milk, and just enough sugar to enhance the tomato's natural sweetness without making the dish dessert-like. Herbs like basil or oregano provided savory complexity, while breadcrumb topping added textural contrast. As it baked, the custard set around the tomato slices, creating a dish that was part quiche, part vegetable gratin, and entirely original. This represented 1950s experimental cooking at its finest. Housewives willing to try techniques that seemed unusual but delivered unexpectedly delicious results. The finished dish challenged diners' preconceptions about what tomatoes could become. Sweet and sour cabbage bake. German-American families perfected this technique for transforming tough winter cabbage into something tender and flavorful that satisfied both adult palates and children's preferences for balanced, sweet-sour flavors. The dish combined shredded cabbage with apples, onions, and a sauce that balanced vinegar's tang with brown sugar's warmth, creating complexity that developed during long, slow baking. This wasn't just economical cooking, it was cultural preservation, maintaining old-world flavors while adapting to new-world ingredients and techniques. The preparation was almost ritualistic, layering ingredients in a specific order that ensured even cooking, then covering tightly so the cabbage steamed in its own juices while absorbing the sweet-sour sauce. The result was tender cabbage that had lost any harsh bite while gaining depth and character from the interplay of flavors. Served alongside pork chops or sausages, it completed meals that connected American families to European heritage while celebrating the abundance of local ingredients. Each forkful delivered comfort that transcended cultural boundaries. Vegetable curry stew. Post-war America's growing international awareness introduced suburban kitchens to exotic spices, and this mild curry proved that adventurous flavors could be family-friendly and budget-conscious. Using whatever vegetables were cheap or needed using up, cooks created aromatic stews that transported diners far from their dining rooms while keeping costs minimal. The curry powder was the star, a mysterious blend that transformed ordinary vegetables into something exotic and exciting. Potatoes, carrots, onions, and whatever else needed using up simmered in a sauce enriched with coconut milk or cream, creating a dish that was both familiar and foreign. The key was balancing the spices so they enhanced rather than overwhelmed the vegetables' natural flavors. This dish represented 1950s cultural curiosity, families willing to experiment with foreign flavors while maintaining comfort food sensibilities. Each spoonful delivered warmth and complexity that suggested worldly sophistication while using ingredients from the local grocery store. It proved that American kitchens could adapt global flavors to local tastes and budgets. Hominy and bacon casserole. Southern staples traveled nationwide as families relocated for post-war opportunities, and this hearty casserole introduced northern palates to hominy's unique texture and corn flavor enhanced by smoky bacon. The dish combined soaked and cooked hominy with crispy bacon bits and enough sauce to bind everything into a cohesive casserole that baked until bubbly and golden. Hominy's chewy texture provided substance, while bacon contributed the smoky richness that made everything irresistible. The preparation was straightforward but required patience. Hominy needed proper soaking and cooking to achieve the right consistency, while bacon required careful rendering to extract maximum flavor without overcooking. Smart cooks used the rendered bacon fat to create a roux for the binding sauce, ensuring no flavor was wasted. This dish represented American regional food sharing, techniques and ingredients crossing geographical boundaries as families moved for work and opportunity. The result was comfort food that satisfied like the finest Southern cooking while introducing new audiences to ingredients they might not have encountered otherwise. Parsley noodle pudding. European Jewish immigrants brought this technique to American kitchens, where it evolved into a sweet, savory side dish that puzzled and delighted diners unfamiliar with noodle pudding's versatility. The dish combined egg noodles with cottage cheese, sour cream, and enough eggs to create a custard-like texture that set during baking. Fresh parsley provided color and herbaceous flavor that balanced the richness, while cottage cheese contributed protein and tangy complexity. This wasn't just economical cooking, it was cultural bridge building, introducing mainstream American palates to Eastern European traditions while using readily available ingredients. The preparation required technique, cooking noodles until just tender, then folding them gently with the dairy mixture to prevent breaking. The finished dish resembled a cross between mac and cheese and bread pudding, with a golden top that gave way to creamy noodle-studded interior. Served alongside roasted chicken or beef, it completed meals that celebrated American diversity while proving that immigrant traditions could enrich the national cuisine. Savory oatmeal bake. Breakfast oats transformed into dinner when combined with vegetables, cheese, and herbs in this hearty casserole that challenged conventional thinking about what oatmeal could become. The dish emerged from wartime rationing when cooks discovered that oats' ability to absorb flavors made them perfect for savory preparations that stretched protein and satisfied appetites. Steel-cut oats worked best, maintaining some texture even after long baking while absorbing the flavors of sautéed onions, celery, and whatever vegetables needed using up. Cheese and eggs bound everything together, while herbs provided aromatic complexity that elevated humble ingredients into something genuinely delicious. The preparation required faith in the process. Oats looked unpromising until they absorbed liquid and melded with other ingredients during baking. The result was a hearty, nutritious dish that satisfied like the finest grain pilaf while costing pennies to prepare. This represented Depression-era innovation that continued into prosperity. Proof that creative cooks could transform the most basic ingredients into satisfying meals. Pea and egg salad plate. Cold salads provided relief during hot summers before air conditioning, and this protein-rich combination proved that simple ingredients could create satisfying meals that required no cooking. The dish combined hard-boiled eggs with tender peas in a creamy dressing that could be mayonnaise-based or made with sour cream for extra tang. The key was balancing textures. Eggs provided richness, while peas contributed sweetness and color that made the salad visually appealing. Smart cooks added celery for crunch and herbs for aromatic complexity that elevated the simple combination into something special. This wasn't just economical cooking, it was practical nutrition, providing complete protein while using ingredients that were always affordable and available. The preparation was perfect for hot days when firing up the stove seemed unbearable, but families still needed satisfying meals. Served on crisp lettuce with fresh rolls, it completed lunches that satisfied without overwhelming in summer heat. This dish represented American practicality, creating nutritious, appealing meals using simple techniques and readily available ingredients. Raisin rice pilaf. Middle Eastern techniques adapted to American kitchens produced this aromatic dish that transformed plain rice into something exotic and satisfying using raisins, nuts, and spices that suggested far-off places while using ingredients from the local grocery store. The dish began with rice toasted in butter until fragrant, then simmered with broth instead of water to develop deeper flavors. Raisins added sweetness that balanced savory elements, while nuts provided textural contrast and richness. Spices like cinnamon and allspice suggested sophistication, while remaining family-friendly and mild enough for children's palates. This represented post-war America's growing cultural curiosity. Families willing to experiment with international flavors while maintaining comfort food sensibilities. The preparation required attention to liquid ratios and timing, but the results justified the effort. Fluffy rice studded with plump raisins and crunchy nuts that made every bite interesting. Served alongside roasted chicken or lamb, it completed meals that suggested worldly sophistication while remaining thoroughly American in their adaptation and execution. Bologna and apple skillet. Lunch meat transcended sandwiches in this unexpected skillet dish that combined sliced bologna with tart apples in a sweet, savory preparation that surprised and delighted diners. The technique was pure American innovation, taking affordable processed meat and transforming it through cooking and creative combinations that created something entirely new. Thick slices of Bologna were scored and fried until the edges curled and the surfaces caramelized, then combined with sliced apples that cooked until tender while maintaining some texture. A touch of brown sugar and vinegar created a glaze that balanced the Bologna's saltiness with the apple's tartness. This dish emerged from practical necessity. Bologna was cheap and kept well, while apples were often available from storage or local orchards. The combination seemed unlikely, but worked beautifully, with the fruit's acidity cutting through the meat's richness while cooking methods created new textures and flavors. This represented American culinary creativity at its finest, transforming humble ingredients through technique and imagination. Corn and cottage cheese pie. Midwest abundance met creative cooking in this unusual pie that combined sweet corn kernels with tangy cottage cheese in a custard base that set beautifully during baking. The dish emerged from farm kitchens where both corn and dairy products were plentiful, and creative cooks discovered that their combination created flavors and textures that satisfied like the finest quiche while costing a fraction of restaurant versions. Fresh corn scraped from the cob provided sweetness and texture, while cottage cheese contributed protein and tang that balanced the corn's richness. Eggs bound everything together, while a simple pastry crust provided structure and buttery contrast. The preparation celebrated seasonal abundance. This was best when corn was at peak sweetness, and cottage cheese was made from the richest milk. As it baked, the custard set around the corn kernels, creating a dish that was part savory pie, part vegetable casserole, and entirely satisfying. Each slice delivered the essence of American agriculture, proof that simple local ingredients could create memorable meals. Beet and potato hash. Root vegetables from the root cellar or storage shed combined in this colorful hash that proved nutritious eating could be both beautiful and satisfying during winter months when fresh vegetables were scarce. The dish combined diced cooked beets with potatoes in a skillet preparation that created crispy edges while maintaining tender centers. The beets' earthiness complemented the potatoes' starchy comfort, while their natural sugars caramelized during cooking to create complex flavors that developed with each minute in the hot skillet. Smart cooks added onions for sharpness and herbs for aromatic complexity that elevated simple ingredients into something genuinely delicious. The preparation was part technique, part timing, achieving the right balance between crispy exterior and tender interior while preventing burning required attention and skill. The finished dish delivered both visual appeal and satisfying substance, with the beet's ruby color creating beautiful contrast against golden potatoes. This represented Depression-era ingenuity that continued into prosperity, proof that humble ingredients could create memorable meals when treated with respect and creativity. Closing. These 25 dishes tell the story of an America caught between Depression-era frugality and post-war prosperity, where creative housewives transformed humble ingredients into satisfying family meals that stretched budgets without sacrificing flavor or nutrition. Each recipe represents not just a meal, but a moment in culinary history when American kitchens became laboratories of innovation, adapting global techniques to local ingredients while creating entirely new traditions that would influence how we eat for generations. From Hamburger rice skillet pie that fed families for pennies to elegant carrot rings that impressed dinner guests, these dishes prove that creativity matters more than expensive ingredients in creating memorable food. They remind us that the best home cooking comes not from fancy equipment or exotic ingredients, but from the ingenuity of cooks who understand that every meal is an opportunity to nourish both body and spirit. Ham and bean soup. When the holiday ham bone sat in the refrigerator like a reproachful reminder of excess, wise cooks knew exactly what to do. Ham and bean soup was the ultimate redemption story, turning that leftover bone into liquid gold. Navy beans, soaked overnight and simmered slowly with the ham bone, created a soup so rich and satisfying that it could carry a family through the leanest of times. The process was almost ritualistic. The beans would bubble away on the back burner while life happened around them. Onions, carrots, and celery joined the party, along with bay leaves and whatever herbs were available. By evening, the house would smell like heaven, and the soup would be thick enough to stick to your ribs. It was the kind of meal that made children understand why their parents kept talking about the good old days. Beans and Franks. This dish elevated the humble hot dog into something approaching sophistication. Baked beans enhanced with brown sugar, mustard, and chunks of hot dogs, slow cooked until the flavors melded into sweet and savory harmony. The hot dogs added protein and substance, while the beans provided fiber and comfort. Cooked in a heavy pot or slow cooker, this meal filled the house with aromas that promised satisfaction. The beans would become creamy and rich, while the hot dogs absorbed all the sweet and tangy flavors of the sauce. Served with cornbread or crusty rolls, this meal proved that campfire food could work just as well in the family kitchen. Beef stroganoff. This Russian-inspired dish became an American sensation in the 1970s, proving that international cuisine could be both accessible and affordable. Strips of beef, usually the less expensive cuts, were cooked with mushrooms and onions in a creamy sauce made rich with sour cream. The key was cooking the beef quickly to keep it tender, then letting the sauce do the heavy lifting. Served over wide egg noodles, beef stroganoff was elegant enough for company, but simple enough for a Tuesday night. The dish taught home cooks that they could create restaurant-quality meals in their own kitchens. The creamy sauce, with its tangy finish from the sour cream, elevated humble ingredients into something that felt luxurious. It was the kind of meal that made husbands brag about their wives' cooking to their coworkers. Skillet cornbread. Before expensive baking pans and fancy ingredients, families made cornbread in cast-iron skillets using cornmeal, flour, milk, eggs, and a bit of bacon grease. The hot skillet created a perfectly crispy crust while keeping the inside tender and fluffy. This cornbread was substantial enough to serve as a complete meal with just a pat of butter. The secret to great skillet cornbread was heating the bacon grease in the skillet before adding the batter, creating that signature sizzle and ensuring a golden, crispy bottom crust. Families would serve it hot from the skillet, cutting it into wedges and serving it alongside soup, stew, or just with butter and honey. What made this cornbread memorable was how it turned a simple grain into something that could anchor an entire meal. The combination of the crispy exterior and tender interior, along with the rich flavor from the bacon grease, created a bread that was satisfying and delicious. It proved that with the right technique, even the most basic ingredients could become something extraordinary. Hobo stew. Train-hopping wanderers during the Great Depression created this one-pot wonder using whatever ingredients they could find. The basic recipe combined ground beef, potatoes, carrots, onions, and canned tomatoes. But the beauty was in its flexibility. You could add whatever vegetables or leftovers you had on hand. The stew got its name from the transient workers who would gather around campfires, each contributing something to the communal pot. This sharing spirit made the meal more than just sustenance. It was about community, generosity, and making something beautiful from scraps. The long, slow cooking process allowed all the flavors to meld together into something greater than the sum of its parts. Families adopted this recipe because it could feed a crowd for very little money, and it actually improved with reheating. Mothers would make a big batch on Sunday and serve it throughout the week, each day adding different seasonings or vegetables to keep it interesting. The flexibility of hobo stew meant that no two pots were ever exactly alike, making every meal a small adventure. Biscuits and gravy. Southern families perfected this hearty breakfast dish that combined fluffy, buttery biscuits with rich sausage gravy. The gravy was made from sausage drippings, flour, and milk, creating a thick, creamy sauce that was both filling and flavorful. This combination provided enough protein and calories to fuel a family through a morning of hard work. The art was in making both components perfectly: biscuits that were light and fluffy, and gravy that was smooth and well-seasoned. The sausage provided flavor and richness to the gravy, while the milk created the creamy texture. Families would serve this for breakfast, but it was substantial enough to be dinner when times were tough. What made biscuits and gravy special was how it represented true comfort food, something that was both satisfying and affordable. The combination of carbohydrates, protein, and fat provided lasting energy, while the rich flavors made it feel like a treat rather than just sustenance. It became a symbol of Southern hospitality and home cooking. Deviled ham sandwiches. When lunch needed to be quick but satisfying, deviled ham came to the rescue. Canned ham, mixed with mayonnaise, mustard, and sweet pickle relish, spread between slices of soft white bread, created a sandwich that was both nostalgic and practical. The key was getting the seasoning just right. Enough mustard for tang, enough mayo for creaminess, and just the right amount of relish for sweetness. These sandwiches were perfect for school lunches, afternoon snacks, or light dinners paired with a bowl of soup. The mixture could be made ahead and kept in the refrigerator, ready to create quick meals whenever hunger struck. It was the kind of simple food that reminded people that satisfaction didn't always require complexity. Salmon croquettes. Canned salmon found its finest expression in these golden, crispy patties that transformed simple ingredients into something elegant. Mixed with breadcrumbs, eggs, and seasonings, then formed into patties and pan-fried until golden, these croquettes proved that convenience foods could create memorable meals. The key was not overmixing the ingredients, which would make the croquettes tough. Served with white sauce or simply with lemon wedges, salmon croquettes were sophisticated enough for company, but easy enough for weeknight dinners. The crispy exterior gave way to a tender, flaky interior that was packed with salmon flavor. These taught home cooks that presentation mattered. Even simple ingredients could look and taste elegant with the right technique.